dimensional representation of the reservoir. Then, while accounting for the three-dimensional representation of the reservoir, it mimics the right fluid flow in the reservoir and also balance the fluid movement in the reservoir, and then impose other physical constraints or operating constraints depending on what the engineer is trying to achieve in his modeling. So by the right of this slide, you can see a picture of a reservoir model that shows the different sections for the water, for the oil, for the gas. So it's more like it gives you a detailed view, a detailed understanding of what is happening in the reservoir. But this process is, first of all, is very, very computationally extensive, and it's very expensive as well because it is not a simple process. It's not an easy task. So most times people may not get to do reservoir simulation, but we have another approach. We have another method that can give us an idea of the driving indices in our reservoir, help us estimate our reserves, and it can still be used to predict the performance of the reservoir or run forecast and impose time constraints on our production from the reservoir. And that is exactly what material balance gives us. So material balance on its own, it's a zero-dimensional approach, first of all. So that's one of the limitations it has because it's a zero-dimensional approach. And then, but despite the fact that it is zero-dimensional, it has the capability to still provide insight on what is happening in the reservoir during production. And because if you look at the whole components of material balance equation, you will get to see different driving indices that are contributing to production. So in as much as it's not well detailed, like the reservoir simulation that looks at the three-dimensional view of the reservoir and account for what happens in each cell, because in reservoir simulation, the reservoir is broken down into cells, from the static model that was developed by the geologists and passed down to the reservoir engineers. They perform some upscaling on this model before they start using it to run the analysis. So the reservoir is broken down into tiny cells. So in each of those cells, they will be able to calculate the variation in properties of the reservoir. So each properties in the reservoir varies. The pressure at a particular cell is not going to be the pressure at another neighboring cell. Likewise, the saturation. But in material balance, it takes an average property. It assumes that in the overall system, a particular pressure value is constant at that point in time in the system. The porosity is constant at that particular time in the system. So that's why it's a zero-dimensional approach. But it still has the capability, like I said, to give us an insight of what is happening in our reservoir and give us an understanding of the different production mechanisms that we can carry out on the reservoir. So right before us here is the equation that describes the material balance, the general material balance equation, whereby you have all the production data input into it, the PVT part, the water influx part. Then if there is an injection, water injection or gas injection, the equation has the ability to account for each and every one of them. So the question I want to ask is more like an icebreaker, or maybe something that we need to ponder on before we move on. The first question is this: can conventional material balance calculation, can conventional material balance calculations be used to provide realistic long-term depletion forecast in an efficient method that solves both the single and multi-tank communicating reservoir systems? Does material balance has what it takes to provide realistic? That word realistic is very expensive if you ask me, because reservoir simulation is more realistic to me. If you ask me, that gives me a full picture of what is happening in the reservoir. Even though it is more expensive, it takes more time, it's highly computationally intensive, but you cannot compare the realistic result and insight it gives to you to what you get from material balance. So I won't give material balance 100%, but to some extent, I can still give it 70% or 80% because, like I said, it can give you an insight of what is happening in your reservoir. And the insight it gives to you becomes more stronger when you have more production data, because everything in material balance depends on your history, the history data you have. If you can be able to provide the right input and then have enough history, the analytical solution should be able to get something that you can give that 70 to 80% confidence interval to say, okay, let me now bring in a well model to start making it a predictive material balance where I can now run prediction with my well models and all that. So that's the answer I would give to it. I don't know for each and every one of us here, but we can ask ourselves that question and then give a kind of honest answer to it. So that brings me to the other second question, which I've also talked about while answering the first question. Can these systems be integrated with advanced well-bore modeling technique to increase the reliability of our prediction? So yeah, you can couple your well models into your material balance model, making it a predictive model you can use to run prediction. So, but whatever prediction you are running with your coupled well models depends on how you've been able to model the reservoir system itself. The main tank model, being it a single tank, being it a model, be it a multi-tank, have you been able to get the right history match, and have you been able to validate that history match, which is part of the things that we are going to discuss as we proceed in the presentation. So even though we are going to end this presentation looking at multi-tank systems, it is right for us to start from single tank modeling, because most times in the industry, people you don't jump straight into multi-tank systems. Some things happen while building a single tank that will give you a signal that this system I'm building in isolation could actually be communicating with neighboring systems. So it's like this is not going to be a single tank. So that brings you back to following the best practices to actually validate or find out that, okay, this is a multi-tank system before you now start following the approach of how to build a multi-tank system. So we are going to I'm going to also discuss about the best practices that should be followed while building a material balance model, irrespective of whether you are building a single tank model or a multi-tank model. The principles still remain the same. And when discussing that of the multi-tank, you will now see where an idea from simulation was borrowed to be able to formulate the multi-tank modeling system that analytical material balance solution has. So very first thing that goes into the material balance modeling is the input data. If you look at the left-hand side of this slide, I put reservoir engineers down below. So if you're a reservoir engineer, don't be angry, but I have to say the truth. So the success of our model depends on some other discipline guys. And those guys are the geologists, the petrophysicists, the PT, even the process guys, because by the time you start coupling your model into maybe into GAP or start running some production forecast that will get to the surface, you need to understand how your surface networks look like. So, but what I'm trying to say is the reservoir engineers are like the small picture. They are the end game of this whole building process. So you don't sit on your own and then build a model. You must have an understanding of the subsurface structure you are building the model for. You must have an understanding of the petrophysical data that you are using to build a model. The PT guys are also there by the time they finish building their well model.
Hello, sorry, you are muted or mute.
You are muted, we can't hear anything for the past 5 to 10 seconds.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. So as I was saying, I talked about the other discipline guys that reservoir engineers work with. to be able to come up with a realistic model, because you don't stay on your own and build a model. You need to have an understanding. Even when you feel the system is going to be a multi-tank system, you don't conclude on your own. You need to meet your geologists, have a look at the subsurface structure, get to understand how it looks like, what even made it to be a multi-tank system. The geologist will help you to validate that, okay, this is a multi-tank system, maybe because of the faults that separated the two blocks that was not completely sealed. So there could be a possible leak between those tanks. Or it could be that the present water contact has moved to a point where there's a saddle in the fault, and the saddle now separates those connected tanks and now make them to be separate and now be a different tanks on their own. Maybe at the inception of the reservoir, it's everything started from a single oil water contact, but along the line, due to the presence of the saddle. So all these things are the information that you get from the geologist to understand the subsurface. So for me, reservoir engineers are like they are the end process of this whole material balance building process, because of the input that they need from all these discipline guys, including the operation guys that are in the field monitoring the production from these reservoirs and all that. So these inputs come from these guys, and the accuracy of these inputs can make or mar your model. And during the course of this presentation, I'm going to spend some time to talk about the importance of these inputs that go into material balance analysis or material balance modeling. Okay, the underlying process that goes in, the very first process that goes in is what we call the PVT matching. First of all, to understand the fluid behavior of the reservoir, you need to obtain the fluid samples, take it to the lab, get to do your PVT analysis to know your bubble point pressure, your oil formation volume factor values, both at whether the experiment started at bubble point or started from bubble point, but you get this information from the lab, and then you do correction to make sure that this data is corrected to the standard field and separator condition before you now proceed to the PVT matching. So what's the importance of this PVT matching? So in the literature, we have a lot of correlations in the literature that has been developed by various researchers. So these, some of them, Glazo, Standing, Lasata, and the rest. So these correlations were carried, the experiments that led to the development of these correlations were carried out with the reservoir fluid that is not the same with the fluid of the current reservoir you are trying to model. But these correlations can actually be corrected. So the whole essence of your PVT matching is to find the multiplier and the shift factor. I call them adjustment factors that I can apply on whatever I am getting from these correlations, so that I can be able to come closer to the reality of the fluid behavior in my reservoir, which I've already gotten from my PVT lab experiment. So the correlation results are going to be matched against the results that came from the lab. And while the process of matching is going on, the algorithm that is doing the matching will try to obtain the parameter 1 and parameter 2, which is the multiplier for parameter 1, and the shift for the parameter the shift for the parameter 2. So now the success of a good material balance model depends on this PVT data and the parameters that you obtained after matching. I've seen cases where we do PVT matching with some data. I see people do PVT matching with some data. I've also witnessed it. And because of the nature of the PVT data, because it is not correct, and you get to see parameter 1 being 2 point something or 3 point something, it doesn't make sense, because there's a linear correlation between what you are calculating and what was measured in the lab. And because it's a linear correlation, it is now suggested that parameter 1 should be close to 1, because if I have a straight line, the slope is 1, and then the intercept is 0. So that's why the multiplier should be closer to 1, while the shift should be closer to 0. So in a situation where you did PVT matching and you are getting match parameter 1 of 2 point something, 3 point something, is a red flag. Because what it simply means is that if I have 1.1 or 1.02 or 1.03, the 03 means 3% deviation from the original measured data, which is not bad. Most times in the industry, we work with anything less than 10%. If I have 1.1, that's 10%. If I have 1.2, 20%. But it should about having 2 point something. That's more like 100%. And I don't know the explanation on how such data can be defended. So if you go ahead in your modeling with such data, it's obvious that you are going to, of course, we're using a software, whatever you put in, you get a result. But the question is, how accurate is the result and how representative is that model? Is that the right representation of your reservoir? It's something that you may find it very, very difficult to defend based on the existing literature, based on what this thing is supposed to be. So this is one key aspect that goes into the material balance equation, that the process needs to happen at the way it's supposed to be, and we need to pay very good attention to what is going to happen and the result that comes out from the machine. So at the end of the day, you get to see the behavior of various correlations with respect to the multiplier value and the shift value. And then you select the one that is closer to 1 for the parameter 1 and that of 0 to parameter 2. So when that is done now, let's now proceed to talk about the analytical solution approach too. We are still discussing about the single tank modeling, which from there we'll now move to the multi-tank. So the analytical approach, how does material balance now get to use your input data to solve or give you a representative model that mimics the current state of your reservoir? So I've now already linearized the big material balance equation that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. So he put it in a simple straight line form. So the first equation is assuming you are doing injection, maybe you're doing water injection or maybe your gas injection. But if there is nothing like pressure maintenance, like all those water and gas injection, so the equation will degenerate to what we have on the second equation you are seeing on the board. So which is more like your total underground withdrawal is equal to your STOIP multiplied by your total expansion factor, then plus the water influx. So actually, if you look at this equation the way it is, you get to see where the inputs, those 3 inputs I mentioned while I started the presentation, where they go into this equation. You have your STOIP that comes from the geologist. You have your EO, which is oil expansion, EG gas expansion, and EFW, which is current water expansion. That EO, what actually goes in there is your PVT properties, your BO, your RS, majorly. That's what you use, BO minus BOI plus the initial RS minus the current condition of the RS times your gas formation volume factor. So that's where those PVT properties that those MASH parameters that you've gotten as you are running the computation, they are being used to estimate what these properties are going to be to account for both the oil expansion, gas cap expansion, the current water. Then on the left-hand side, that's where you get to see the production terms too, together with PVT parameters. So all the production data that you use for your modeling process. So material balance relies so much on the production data. If you don't have production data, then you can't do material balance, because it has to understand your history from your production data and the PVT data you've been supplied. But the major big unknown here, which most times contributes to that difference in calculated MP, which is the main thing that we do in history matching, is the water influx. So when I get to the history matching part, I'm going to explain this part again very well. So, but then that leads us to the other term that has been added to the right-hand side, which is the water influx. Now, for us to estimate the water influx, we have different water influx models. We have small pot aquifer, which is too academic, it's time independent. So then we have the SHIELD2 steady state, the host model, the Katatracy, and the Katatracy and the Feshkovich model. So the host model, host and Faneva-Dijim model, which use the Laplace transformation to solve for on steady state flow equation. So it has a two solution for it, the constant terminal pressure solution and the constant terminal rate. So we all know that as pressure drops between the reservoir and the aquifer, that pressure drop causes an effect in the reservoir. It sends an effect to the aquifer that makes the water expand water expand in the aquifer, thereby supplying a certain amount of water into our reservoir to support our production. So that's the idea behind the constant terminal pressure. So since from my production data, I have my BHP data, at some points in the production data, you will see the days where the BHP was acquired. So if I know that pressure, what is the corresponding amount of water that is going to move from my aquifer into the reservoir based on the pressure drop that has taken place from the initial pressure of the reservoir down to that current pressure I am trying to analyze. So that's the whole idea behind the constant terminal pressure. So if I know it, I can be able to calculate the rate. And that rate now measures the water influx that moves into the reservoir. So there's a modified version of this host model, which we know it's known as host and Van Everdegeem modified. But the difference between the normal host and Van Everdegeem model, host and Van Everdegeem OD and host and Van Everdegeem modified, is the way the pressure drop was calculated. On the right-hand side, you are going to see a chart that has two different depletion process. The first one is more like a stepwise, where you have your P1, P1 bar, P2 bar, P3 bar. So it's a stepwise depletion. So the normal host and Van Everdegeem model assumes that the pressure drop in the reservoir is not instantaneous. Like it's something that is a sudden drop at a particular time. So it gets to there's a particular time when the pressure of a reservoir will suddenly drop all the way from PI down to P1 bar. The same thing happens to the drop from P1 bar down to P2 bar. So it's a stepwise drop. Then, but in the modified, because of the reality of this pressure drop, because the pressure drop that happens in the reservoir is a cumulative effect. It doesn't happen in a particular day. It's an effect, it's an accumulative effect of what has happened from the time of last depletion to the current depletion. So the other linear decline you are seeing there mimics that behavior, whereby the pressure is dropping linearly, instantaneously by time. So that modification in terms of how the change in pressure is coupled into this water influx model, this host and Van Everdegeem model gave rise to the modified. And we've seen cases where you are trying to work on a model and you see this modified being able to better mimic your reservoir condition because of this advanced incorporation it did in terms of pressure decline. Another model that we also have, another aquifer model that we also have is kata-tracing model, which removes the superposition, because in host model, for you to calculate, for the way the water influx is estimated, the water influx term that goes into the material balance equation, they use superposition. So what this superposition does is, it's what happens at time steps. Basically, I'm on the third time step. My pressure has dropped from time step 1 to time step 2 to time step 3. So the effect of the drop at that third time step is an accumulation of what has happened in both time step 1 and time step 2. Because let's look at it this way. What if the aquifer is so large that as the first pressure dropped, the effect of that first pressure drop was sent to the aquifer. The aquifer expanded and some volume of water moved from the aquifer into the reservoir. That pressure effect is still taking place in that aquifer, assuming it's a very big aquifer that it has not even felt, the boundary of the aquifer has not even felt the effect of that pressure change. And then another pressure drops. Because the first pressure is still taking effect in the reservoir, so the way the second pressure drop is going to behave will be affected by also the initial pressure drop. So altogether, by the time I analyze all the pressure drop that has occurred in my reservoir, that brings up is a resultant effect at every point in time. So that superposition accounts for the resultant effect of the way pressure has dropped to that particular time. So kata-tracing removed that part in a solution and provided a way that water inflows can as well be calculated without the superposition principle, which is an approximate solution and not an exact solution, but it works. There are some models that you get to work on and you see that characteristic model tends to mimic the real behavior that is exhibited in your reservoir based on the production data and the PVT data and the physical data and even geological data you supplied into the model. So now, the key thing, whether you are building a single tank or a multi-tank, that's why I decided to start from the single tank to make some explanation before we move to multi-tank. So being it a multi-tank, being it a single tank, you must first match your model. The act of matching your model and validating your match is very, very crucial. It's at that point when you are done matching your model, that is when you can now ask yourself, okay, here I have a question mark on this slide. So what this question mark is now, what next? What should I do with this model? I have built a representative analytical material balance model for my reservoir. So what next should I do with it? So the question comes in, okay, I want to run prediction with the model. So if you want to run prediction, you bring in your well model, do your fractional flow matching, check whether the model is monotonic or not, because models that are not monotonic are not good for prediction. Well, that's more like going to, I will still explain maybe if time permits. So you get to check in that what next scenario. That's when you start asking yourself, okay, should I run, if you want to run prediction, you will now couple your well model that you will now use to run prediction. But the history matching process is actually the main thing that goes on in the analytical material balance model. And what exactly are we trying to achieve in this process? So this is a mathematical process. It's an optimization process whereby you have your production data. And from your production data, at those points where you have pressure points, let's say in the entire history of the reservoir, you acquired pressure 10 times in the entire history of the reservoir based on the current date you are building the material balance model. So what exactly that you are trying to do now is you are trying to reduce, because at those pressure points, there is a corresponding cumulative production, be it oil production for oil reservoir or gas production for a gas reservoir. So those corresponding production you have at those particular, at the date of those pressure that you acquired. From the moment you key in all the input data into material balance equation, material balance calculates a corresponding cumulative oil produced at those dates as well. So at the end of the day, you will see disparity, difference between what the material balance is calculating and what you have in your production data. And this difference is caused by some inputs that went into your material balance equation, which you are not sure of, but you supply the value as a starting point for you to have your model. So now, during history matching, you are now performing an optimization process whereby you specify those parameters that you are not sure of. Most of them, but sometimes it could be, if it's a radial aquifer, it could be your dimensionless radius, your reservoir radius, the thickness, the aquifer permeability, because wells are not drilled into the aquifer for you to obtain the petrophysical information of this aquifer. So those values initially were guessed. And because they were guessed, they will affect the amount of water inflows that will be estimated at those pressure points. And because of those overestimation, it leads to a miscalculation of the corresponding cumulative production that occurred at those pressure points. So by the time you compare it with that, what you have in the production data, they tend to be different. They are not the same. So now what we do in history matching is, what we do there now is to minimize this error by performing an optimization process. So it's a very tedious task. It's not a straightforward task, but it's a task that you need to study the behavior of your reservoirs. Most times when building this model, when doing history matching, there are some pressure points that may be outliers, pressure points that don't make sense, but you need to turn them off. You need to remove them. But before you start doing that, you need to also look at the reservoir physics. How has production behaved over time in the reservoir? and why this production is taking place. How is my pressure changing? How is my pressure behaving? So it gives you an idea to know when you are likely going to have a pressure point that is an outlier, or a pressure point that is not supposed to be in the model, because if you allow it to be in the model, it will make it difficult for you to get a representative model for your reservoir. So both when you are removing pressure points and when you are still using pressure points, the whole process you are trying to do then at that point is, I need to minimize the error between my cumulative production from production data and what is coming from material balance. If I'm able to achieve this, as this is going on, some parameters that I guessed are changing in the model. So by the end of the day, if I'm able to minimize it, I'll be able to get right values. For example, if what you are not sure of is the dimensionless radius, it is going to give you a final dimensionless radius that will make your model to match what you have in the history. So now, how do you now validate it? How do you now ascertain that, okay, the history match which I have done is correct? So at that point, you move into the pressure simulation. So what that does now is those solutions that you've obtained from your history matching, you send it back into the material balance equation using the Arena or the straight line form, and then recompute what the pressure will be using the root solver. So if those solutions are correct, if your history match results are correct, you are supposed to get a right pressure that will match what your historical pressure is, and also give you what the historical pressure is at those dates that you did not acquire pressure point. Because for the case study I just mentioned, we have 10 pressure points, but this reservoir were produced for like 50 months or 30 months. So during that simulation time, because those history match results are correct, it's going to give you all those pressure, both the one on the months you not acquire pressure points and on the month you acquire pressure points. So if your pressure simulation doesn't look good after you have done your history match, then it means that you have to go back and repeat your history matching. So this is where most time is spent during material balance modeling. So, and it's even at this stage that most times you get to know or discover that, okay, there could be a multi-tank system playing out. So when we get to that part, I will show you guys some things that may make you to start thinking or maybe suspecting that this could actually be, this tank that I'm trying to model could actually be communicating with another neighboring tank. But mind you, remember, it is not your decision alone. Whatever suspect you have, whatever thing your mind is telling you, still know that you need to refer back to your team. Your geologist has to be aware. You need to understand the subsurface structure for you to have that full confidence to say, okay, this is a multi-tank system. Let me proceed and build it as a multi-tank system. So that's it. So having established what single tank modeling is, and also I've also talked about some things about the multi-tank system. Let's now talk about some things and lay some foundation that will lead us into multi-tank modeling. So here I have a definition. I call it a reservoir unit. So a reservoir unit is a reservoir, normal reservoir tank with its underlying aquifer. And altogether is a reservoir unit. At the top right hand of this slide, you will see, I don't know if there's a pointer here. Okay. At the top right hand of this chart, you will see a schematic of a single tank with an aquifer. So a tank, a reservoir on its own with a supporting aquifer makes up a single reservoir unit. So now below, we have different cases. We have that of A, B, and C. So multi-tank system can exist in various forms. I have system A, whereby two reservoirs, 1 and 2, are not communicating, but they are being supported by a common aquifer. So in this case, the aquifer, what the aquifer is doing, the way the aquifer will be charging the two reservoirs, the reservoirs are going to behave with respect to what the aquifer is doing. Then in the case B, I also have another 2 communicating reservoirs that are being supported by the same aquifer. While in case C, you have 3 reservoirs whereby 2 are communicating with each other, but then the other 2 is being supported by a common aquifer. And several cases, multi-tank system can exist in various forms. that's where that importance of discussion with your geologist comes in, because you need to understand what exactly is playing out in this block, in this reservoir zone, because you have a reservoir sand that has several blocks in it. So you want to know, okay, are those blocks on their own? Are they on their own as reservoir units doing their production on their own? Or is there any possibility of communication? And if there is, how is the structure? So it could be in any form. That's where that collaboration comes in. So from your geologist, for you to understand the full system and then know how to model it. So, but irrespective of how the system is, there is something playing out here. Let me go back to the former slide. You see, when you have a tank, a reservoir, being supported by a reservoir, being supported by an aquifer, what is actually playing out between the aquifer and the reservoir is transmissibility. There's a flow between them. But in this case, it was modeled as a water influx, which we've studied, we've looked at water influx models. So those water influx models helps us to calculate the transmissibility, the flow that is existing between the aquifer and the reservoir itself. The same thing happens when you couple in your well model. When you put in your well inside the reservoir, there is now a transmissibility between, there's a communication, there's a flow of fluid between that well and the reservoir. So what does this thing simply mean? It means that when two reservoirs are communicating, then there is also a transmissibility happening. There's a communication between them which can still be modeled with that transmissibility concept. So that brings us to the topic of transmissibility, because this is one key parameter that is added to the normal single tank model to account for the multi-tank system. So, so it is now left for you to now decide, based on your understanding of the reservoir system, based on the communication happening, whether the communication is between two reservoirs or the communication is two reservoirs communicating, then the other one is not communicating, but they are supported by the same aquifer or different aquifer system. Depending, there are even when you have an underlying aquifer supporting three tanks, there are some other school of thought. There are some things that we also need to think about when modeling such system, because if I have a single reservoir unit that comprises of the reservoir and this underlying aquifer, when I finish modeling that system, the final values I'm getting in my aquifer model is with respect to that reservoir that I modeled the aquifer with. For example, the encroachment angle. The final result I will get in my encroachment angle or my dimensionless videos is with respect to that reservoir. So when you say 2-3 reservoirs are being supported by a single aquifer, one may ask, okay, if I lump one aquifer into this system and then I model it, at the end of the day, the final solution in the aquifer model, how is the interpretation going to look like? Is it going to be with respect to one of the reservoirs, or is it going to be an average solution to all the reservoirs? So there are different cases, there are different ways that this multi-tank system can be, but it all boils down to the collaboration and discussion between you and your team to better understand what is playing out in the subsurface. But the whole concept is, if there is a communication between reservoirs, you bring in transmissibility. And this transmissibility is a term that is used to define how fluid is able to move through a system. So the first equation that you see here is a transmissibility constant that can be estimated through a fault analysis, where maybe the geologist will do the fault analysis and then give you a constant value, the way it's been imputed into a material balance modeling, a constant value that could mimic what that transmissibility is, the constant. So, but as this constant is introduced into the system, you are now introducing another set of unknown into the system. Remember, when we built a single tank, we have some unknowns that we don't even know. Your STOIP is an unknown value. Your gas cap is an unknown value. Your RD, or some of the aquifer parameters are unknown. And in addition to that, in the multi-tank system, you now have another unknown that you are introducing to the system, which is this transmissibility, because the fault through which this communication is taking place, you didn't go down there to calculate the absolute permeability or the effective permeability of that fault to maybe the relative permeability with respect to a particular phase. You do not even know the area or the extent or the length of the fault. So it's just, that's why when they do fault analysis, geologists do fault analysis, they give you an idea of a constant value that you can start with and perform your regression, your optimization process before you now get a final value that will help you match your model. So that constant goes into the down formula that you will now use to estimate a rate. That rate you are estimating is actually the transmissibility, the rate at which fluid is moving. It could be in either direction. It could be from, if it is 2 tanks, it could be from tank A to tank B, or it could be from tank B to tank 1, to tank A to B or B to A, depending on your understanding of the system. It could also be that it is flowing from one tank to the another tank, but the flow started at a particular pressure. There was a certain pressure drop that took place before another tank started supporting this your present tank. So these are all the things that you account for, you know. So by the time you model your transmissibility, right here you have your rate M over the mu, which is the mobility ratio, and your pressure potential. Pressure potential now accounts for the change in pressure between the 2 tanks. So at this point, we are going to take a look at this case study here. So from this case study here, I will go ahead and do a small demo with the industry application that most of us know that we normally use for building machine balance model, which is EMBA. So I have 2 tanks, tank 2 and tank 1, and the production currently is taking place in tank 1. Tank 2 is not producing. So over time, when the engineers that own this field now went to acquire pressure on tank 2, they now noticed that the pressure has dropped from what it was, from the initial pressure. Meanwhile, there is no production in tank 2. So why is the pressure dropping? Remember, at the beginning of my presentation, I said there are signs that reservoir engineers can see that will notify them or enlighten them or let them know that there could be a possible multi-tank scenario. But until you discuss with your geologist, that is still an assumption because you need to understand the subsurface. So, but in this case now, what even led to that was that in tank 1, when trying to match tank 1, which is a plot, I'm showing you the graph here, they noticed that there was change in gradient. If you see, there are 2 lines here. The first line has a particular slope, but all of a sudden the slope changed. Something else. So at the first line of graph, the aquifer or the reservoir is producing based on its normal energy, and the normal depletion natural effect is taking place. All of a sudden, the rate at which the reservoir pressure is dying, it's changed. It's because it became a little bit steeper, like it came up, meaning that something else is actually supporting this reservoir. So it will be very difficult to match this tank 1 because the production that you have, the production data you supplied to the tank 1 model is for what left the reservoir. But the reservoir itself is getting support from somewhere else. So you need to account for the other support that this reservoir is getting for you to be able to get a match for this model. So in that case, these are the 2 possible signs that led to the engineer to suspect that, okay, there could be a multi-tank system here. Let's build a multi-tank system. Let's build as a multi-tank system and then see what's going to happen. So in a nutshell, tank 1 is not producing. No well is tied to it. It could be tank 1 could be is an oil reservoir. Tank 2 can be either an oil reservoir or gas reservoir. It depends. But all of a sudden, pressure dropped, and it was even difficult to match tank 1 if we don't account for the fluid that is moving from tank 2 to tank 1. So in this case now, to build this kind of system, that's what leads to a multi-tank system where you now have to bring in the final factor, which is the transmissibility, for you to model this kind of system. So it's a simple case, but it's going to serve as a simple demo case. But the most important thing is to get a concept, the main message that this whole multi-tank system is all about. So here, I have the 2 tanks. So this is my tank 1, and I have my tank 2. So for now, these 2 tanks are volumetric. They don't have any aquifer. Like I said, production is taking place in tank 1. So if you look at the history, this is the production history for tank 1. But if I move to tank 2, you will see that tank 2 is not producing. The tank 2 is not producing. So to try to model the system, first of all, after doing your PVT machine and setting up your input parameters, these are the tank parameters for tank 1, both the stoic, the porosity, the initial pressure for the water influx. There is no water influx for now because it's a volumetric reservoir. But the same idea plays out even if you have a non-volumetric reservoir, whereby you have your aquifer model. So if there is an aquifer support, you simply attach the aquifer support, because the support from the aquifer is also a kind of support that is also coming from the communication. If there is a communication from another reservoir into this particular tank, it's a support to tank 1. And then aquifer 2 is also doing it. So if there's an aquifer supporting, you bring your aquifer model in. And then you have set up your rock from the porosity, the rock compressibility will be estimated based on what the rock porosity is, the reservoir porosity is, and then set up your RAPM and then the production data. So while we proceed to the history machine side, we now noticed this sudden change in the pressure gradient. So what's going to happen right now is solving this kind of system, we already have some set of unknowns that was introduced into the system from the aquifer models. And then because we now have a multi-tank system, another unknown is being added to the loads of unknown that we have. So the best way to tackle this kind of system is you try as much as possible to solve for some unknowns so that you can be able to reduce the amount of unknown that you are solving for, because it's going to help you in the whole optimization process. So what needs to be done here is to, first of all, this first phase, these first 6 points where the slope of the depletion was constant, was the same, I need to first match those points. Matching those points is more like matching what tank 1 was doing naturally on its own before it started getting support from tank 2. So if I can match it, it will be able to help me know what my stoic is at that point. So by the time I bring in my compressibility, my transmissibility, I will now have 2 unknowns that I'm solving for, but even the stoic that I've solved here is still an unknown, but I have obtained a solution that is closer to the main solution. So it is not going to be more tedious at that point. So it is going to help the optimization algorithm to give you a better solution. So what's going to happen when that tank 2 comes in now? Tank 2 will now readjust the stoic of tank 2, which is not producing, but it is supporting tank 1. So if the team had already done resource evaluation, estimate the stoic of tank 2. Now that we have seen that tank 2 is supporting tank 1, it means that that stoic is no longer going to be the same. So we need to re-evaluate and know what the stoic is going to be. So, and it is the act of matching this model here that will help us know what the final stoic is in tank 2, and then what stoic is going to be in our existing tank 1 that is already producing for us. So if I turn off these pressure points and leave just the fixed points and then do my regression. So now I'm focusing on only tank 1. So if I calculate, it's going to give me 194 as the stoic for tank 1. So I'm sending the solution, and then I will have my first match for tank 1, which is closer to the solution. Remember, when I bring in my transmissibility and then do the final coupling, final history match for this model, this stoic is still going to be touched a little bit, but as it is now, it is closer to the solution and it's going to help the optimization algorithm. So the next thing I'm going to do now is my geologist has told me, okay, we've analyzed and we've concluded that, okay, there is a communication between the 2 tanks. So I'm going to bring in transmissibility. So the geologist must have done fault analysis and then have been able to give me that initial guess of what transmissibility value to start with. So all I need to do is to bring my transmissibility and add in between these 2 tanks, and then define the connection is going to be between tank 1 to tank 2. Then the flow is it going to be in both directions, or is the flow from tank 1 to tank 2, or from tank 2 to tank 1? In this case, it's from tank 2 to tank 1. Then my initial guess, maybe 5, the geologist gave me 5 to start with. And then because when I looked at the initial pressure plot, I was able to see at what point when tank 2 started supporting my tank 1. And if I look at, let me show you guys something. So the whole support started from this 0.7. So if I check the drop in pressure from this 4,000 down to this 0.7, you will see that is approximately about 900 and something. About 1,000 psi. So I can come here and specify that I want to use pressure threshold with unequal potential, because there is now pressure imbalance between the two tanks. At every point in time, the pressure in tank 1 and the pressure in tank 2 is not the same. There has to be a higher one. So it's more like for fluid to flow, there must be a pressure difference. Fluid must flow from a region of high potential to a region of low potential. So, but that flow started after I experienced about 1,000 psi drop in my model in the reservoir. So if that is done, and then I come back to my history matching process, now I have my analytical model for both with transmissibility and without transmissibility. So as at the time I bring back these pressure points that I turned off to now do a final regression on the whole model. So I'm going to regress on the transmissibility because it will help, excuse me, it's going to help me estimate how the rate at which fluid is flowing between those tanks. And then I'm going to also readjust, like I said, since fluid is moving from tank 2 to tank 1, of course, the STOIP is definitely going to change. So at this point, I will now do my regression and then get my results. Initially, it was 194, but after the total regression, it's dropped down a little bit to 193.8. And this is the STOIP for the initial tank, and this is the rate of my transmissibility. And then I key into the solution. And at this point, I was able to get a match. So if you notice, if I didn't bring transmissibility into this history matching, it's going to be difficult to match this other point, because that's the plot without history matching, without transmissibility, is already going down, while the one with transmissibility was able to match the pressure behavior down. So at this point, to ascertain the accuracy of the model, you can proceed with your pressure simulation. I think there is no more. This is 11 minutes after 5. Proceed with your pressure simulation, and if you run your simulation and everything looks good based on how the simulation was able to predict the history pressure, you can now say that you have a representative model for your reservoir, which you can now use to proceed to what next, which is running prediction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ebuka. Hello? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm having network problem with my laptop, so I have to switch to phone. It was a insightful presentation. Thank you so much for this. I don't know, there will be a lot of questions, people trying to ask questions, and people trying to ask questions. So I don't know how many questions. Let me just check the chat box for question that has been dropped, so I can read out for you to do justice to it. But thank you for the way you handled the presentation. It was as if we were back to our classes, and it really showed have a quick video. Thanks so much for it. You balance concepts, single tank modeling, communication between the reservoir, the basis of the multi-tank modeling. I think back to the classroom and some professional talks and all that. So thank you so much. We are grateful for this opportunity and thank you once more. So I'll just have questions in the chat box. Sorry, I can't come online again on my laptop, so I have to use another alternative, which is my phone. So I'm trying to look at the messages on the chat box. Okay, someone's hand is up. I think our friend Visual from Jajo. Jajo, please, can we drop a question on the box, please? Okay,
Yes.
I have a question. I have a question from Frank Tabo, and it reads.
Yes.
And it reads: does your reservoir data in Niger Delta support hydraulic fracking of tank 2? Did you get that?
Hello.
Yeah.
Does your reservoir data in Niger Delta support hydraulic fracking of tank 2? That's a question from Frank Tabo.
Okay. So, Mr. Frank, first of all, hydraulic fracturing is a technology that is used on a sandstone that is not permeable enough to allow fluid flow. So here in Niger Delta, our reservoirs are very, very permeable. So we don't apply hydraulic fracturing because there is enough permeability to allow fluid flow in the reservoir. So what basically happens there is not normal fluid flowing from a tank 2 to tank 1 because of the communication between the tanks. Meanwhile, the data I used is a sample data, which I can't tell you that it's not a Niger Delta data, but I'm telling you that here in Niger Delta, our sandstones are well permeable, so we don't employ hydraulic fracturing. Thank you.
Okay. Frank, I hope you did justice to that. Trying to go through for more messages, more questions. Please, can we drop our questions on the chat box? There are no more questions. No more questions here. So I will just. Simeon, can you project the agenda, please? Since we don't have Hello, Simeon. Okay. So we're still in a question section, answer and comment. If there is none, I have to recognize the presence of our.
Sorry, sir.
Our section chairman. Okay, who want to ask a question?
Oh, I just want to comment on the presentation. It was nice, and I particularly loved the demo that was done that he did towards the end. So thank you very much, Ibuka, for the nice presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Destiny. The section chairman is on the Zoom with us. Also, Exit, can you make a comment on this, please? Thank you. Contribute to the said presentation.
Hello.
Okay, so hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, so
Hello.
sorry, I'm in transit, so I will just speak for a minute or thereabout. So thank you so much for organizing this, as you guys have always been organizing technical lectures like back to back. So really appreciated, and I have also seen that we are coming up with much more practical kind of lectures or presentation, which I think will really benefit the people. This is really, really practical, hands-on. So thanks to the speaker and of course to his company also that has sponsored him to do this. I think it's been beneficial for all, and I've also seen the attendance is very good. So it means that your publicity team in YP have also done justice. So I will just use the opportunity to invite everyone here. Again, I think they're already putting it in the chat box. We have another very nice presentation like this tomorrow and next tomorrow. And both presenters are actually distinguished lecturers. So I would not like you to miss this. So thank you all. Really appreciated your support for section 103. And let's continue to do this together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, section chair, for that contribution. Okay, most of us, okay, Destiny is with us already. Tomorrow we have our monthly technical meeting, so you can go to the chat box and there's a link there for registration. There will be another great section on for tomorrow. So you can use the link on the chat box and then do your registration. And that's the advantage of being a member of SP. Simeon, can you project our upcoming event, please? Before we take the vote of thanks, we're going to talk about our upcoming event. So tomorrow we'll be having a lecture program, the two lecture program, the one our section chairman just talked about. And so we can be part of these and get the needed information in an expanding and innovative E&B segment. So join us tomorrow. It's well publicized, and we're using the same platform to tell everybody on this log to make yourself available tomorrow by 5:30 Central African time. We have a high prolific resource person, Tali Seed. He's so loaded. He's so loaded. And then tomorrow he'll be doing justice to the topic, hydrogen and energy, 101 rule of CCUL, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. It's promising to be very, very engaging. So don't just get information and keep it to yourself. Try to invite people in the oil and gas industry. The SP family is open, it's a science family. It's not about you not being a petroleum engineer, you can't benefit from the technical resourcefulness in SP. So once you are in the oil and gas space practicing, either as a young professional or a student, you can be part of it and you can join us. Same on Friday, we have our monthly technical meeting. It's still by Zoom. And the topic is quite engaging. Owning an intellectual property is not rocket science. Or is it? So come prepared, come ask your questions, and you have professionals that are well informed to do justice to it. And we have a dynamic moderator there, Dr. Tobin Spriggs from University of Port Harcourt. And the speaker is an achiever with excellent professional records. There is a tag history he did with Saudi Aramco. Dr. James Haruke is very, very innovative, and it is a result-oriented engineer. So join us on 28th. The links are there for registration. On the chat box, you see it, so you can be part of it. We have the digital webinar 5th of June. We have our multi-technical meeting for June. We'll be having that on 10th. The flyers will be out within next week. Then we have our charity golf event scheduled for 12th of June, 2001. And we have our monthly technical meeting for July on the 8th of July. So these are our upcoming events. So you have to be there, join the log. The benefit of it is that we are all at our home. We can connect virtually and join the conversation. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about SP. I don't know, Otto, or can you do a run on our membership? Thank you very much. Destiny, Otto. Destiny. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, is Destiny on the log? Destiny, can you run?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Oh yeah, go ahead on membership.
So if you have the membership link, you can just drop it also while it's talking. Okay.
Simeon, can you drop the membership link? If you have it on the chat log. So Destiny, can you talk about membership?
Okay, while we are waiting for the membership, it's good to also mention that on June 30, there's going to be a management study group meeting.
Okay, sir.
Public study group.
Okay, public study group.
Transit.
Is it you mean May or June?
May or
June 30.
June. Okay, just send it across to Simeon now to update so that they can be saying it every day.
Simeon issued the letter actually. Sorry. Is aware.
Okay, thank you, sir, for that information. We are honored to have you on the call, our scholarship chair, Engineer Alexis. Thank you so much for joining the virtual meeting. So I will just continue with about SPI. And so, as you know, SP, we're a non-governmental association. We are much interested in the energy space, and that's why I said that SP is not just major to petroleum engineering. It's open for the science family. So SP serves more than 104 members in 123 countries worldwide. Key resources for technical knowledge, provide services through its publication, event, training, courses, and online. We have online courses too. So if you are part of SPA and you're very active, you're up to date, we have online studies group where you can be mentored, where you can join a community across the O&G sector, drilling, reservoir, access management, completion, HLC, and all that. So it's an avenue for us in the oil and gas space to project and keep being trainable and teachable. So SP mission is to collect, disseminate, and exchange technical knowledge concerning exploration, development, and production of oil and gas resources and related technologies for public benefit, and to provide opportunities for professionals to enhance their technical and professional competence. So we are 124,000 members in 135 countries. Then we have 197 sections and 316 student chapters globally. So you can see our professional growth, that we are quite on the rise, and we are projecting professional excellence. So Port Harcourt section, where we are privileged to be today, what the lecture we just listened to from our brother Ebuka is proudly sponsored by the Port Harcourt section. And we happen and privileged to be the second largest in Nigeria, that's covering 6 states, including student chapter. So there you can see our membership strength, 1,119 professional members, and we keep increasing. We have 1,914 student members, and we're still increasing. And you can see our award for the year 2020. We took our award back. That's the ALP that we won in 2020. Despite the COVID year, we were still determined and we were focused. We determined volunteer champions in our YPs. We were able to reclaim that ambassador lecture award. So you can see the award we were privileged to grab last year. And I know in this current body, we're going to do extensive well in some other aspects. So we have Outstanding Young Professionals Award held by our members and so on. So these are the benefits of being an SPA member. I keep telling people I cannot complete my career without telling you the role SPA played, right from being a student member and now that I'm a professional member doing my academic goals in a polytechnic and doing other services related to oil and gas. So the opportunity in SPA is endless. So you come into SPA, you decide the level you want to grow in. People come here and they are unthinkable with what they can achieve, because it gives you a pool of opportunity for you to look inward and ask yourself, what can I do from this opportunity and the resources that SPA offers. So it offers program services for all stages of your career, whether student, young professionals, and even new members. So you can see our SPA online education like a school where you can stay in the comfort of your house and you're getting lectures across each discipline in the oil and gas space. So you have the SP Connect where you can ask your questions. Maybe you're doing a research and you want to ask more questions. You want to understand a certain topic. You can launch that question there. You have people that will attend to it globally. It goes beyond Nigeria. You have the one page through, like our resource person today doing his citation, where he won the Chi Ikoku one petrol competition and all that. There's where you can ask questions that students need to explore this opportunity with what SP offers. So it means a lot when you have an opportunity to grow and project value in your career places, and SP gives you that platform. So you can be technically up to date, interact with colleagues, senior. That has been an aspect that has helped me with a closing rank with mentors, relationship between mentees and mentors. Then you go to the industry, experience people with fountain of technical impact, where you can ask questions and you get answers immediately. So we will look forward with people on this law that are not yet member. And even if you're a member, you're not up to date, please come and update across section. It does many Port Harcourt section. Now, SP still gives you the opportunity to join our link of volunteers. When people like Ebuka today, they share their knowledge in the industry, they are worthy volunteers, and it will go a long way in helping our presenters in giving more to our section. So these are top 10 reasons to join or renew membership. I've said most of this before, but so I'll just cite one. Give back to your local communities and the EP industry through volunteer opportunities. Yes, young professionals, we give back through this avenue, volunteer for our programs, and you can enhance your knowledge about how you can meet what energy needs. So these are what SP gives you. So these are our accounts. If you want to join SP today, this is the account to make your payment. You can come in as a professional member or an e-member. The difference is when you come in as a professional member and you make your payment, you have your Journal of Petroleum Studies sent every month in hard copy, where for e-membership, you get it in e-copies. So that's the account number for e-member. I think the payment is 18,000 naira and is renewable for 14,000. Then that for a complete member, that is 24,000 and is renewable for 14,000. So you can get across to us, you can chat us up, or we can give you more information about that. Thank you so much. So you can connect, reach any of us on the log for our next program. So thank you very much. So I'll call on, I don't know if, Otto, can you give vote of thanks? Hello, Otto.
Let's snap the picture.
Yes, good day, sir.
Otto, can you give vote of thanks? Then after that, then
Yeah.
we'll snap the picture.
Can we snap the picture before the vote?
Okay, can we snap the picture, please? Everybody, can you on your, please put your video on, please. Everybody. Can you put your video on, please? So we can take the picture.
But this is your picture. Nobody is even smiling.
So
For
smile.
God's sake. Yeah,
That's true.
because you know we are going to put this in the report and it's going public and they say what is making these people sad. Engineers should be smiling, please. Don't let the mathematics just turn your head off. Smile.
Okay, Simeon, are you doing justice to that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Thank you so.
I'm still smiling. I'm not sure I can smile for too long though.
Oh yeah. Simeon, just
Said Olosho, I cite you.
I'm saying Said.
I hope you acknowledge the director, so they will find you. I'm not there.
I'll do that after the. I'm just seeing Oga. I'm just seeing Oga Said now. So.
Directors do, board members do.
Oh, how's the picture taking place?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just thank some as very, very senior members I've seen on the call. Oh, sorry, maybe I was it was out of sight. Our own scholarship chair, Alexu, and I've seen Oga Said Olosho. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. I've seen Tunde Farotimi. Thank you so much for joining the call. I know most people would have logged out. Nandi, thank you so much. And here, Madam, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And I can see very active YP members, Adewale, Sadiq, David, Bagashi, Emmanuel, Oyedipe, Brown, George, Gerard, Hidioye. Thank you so much, everybody. So thank you for joining the call. We are grateful. Back to Destiny for the vote of thanks. Destiny, are you there? Hello, Destiny. And again, sorry, this person from India.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Jetson.
So I want to appreciate everyone for taking out time to. Yeah, I'm speaking already. I don't know if you could hear me.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, I'm speaking. Hello.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello, sir.
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Sorry, I don't know. Can I be heard?
Go on. Go on.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll start with. All right. It seems there's a. All right. So I'll start. I'll start with thanking the
Can you guys hear him? Because I'm not sure.
I'm not hearing him.
But just tell him that I think you have done the vote of thanks already, no?
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you. Go on.
Sorry, I said Sorry, I'm sorry about that. Probably, I don't know. So I want to thank the section chairman and the YP chair and the YP technical committee and every other person who has contributed and to the success of this meeting today. And then I want to thank all the members and all the participants of this program for taking out time and for their passion and desire to learn and just grow their technical knowledge. So thank you for attending and have a nice day, everyone.
Okay, just say the closing prayer. Can you pray for us? Okay.
In Jesus' name. Yeah, I can.
Oh,
in
amen.
Jesus' name.
Amen.
Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for the success of the meeting today. We pray and ask that this knowledge we have gotten to Jesus' name. And we pray and ask that your grace rest on every one of us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone that joined today's virtual meeting. Next month, something bigger will happen.